Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Psychedelic. I'm your host, Mike Brancatelli. Thanks for joining me. Got a good episode today. We're talking with author of a book called Getting Higher, the Manual of Psychedelic Ceremony, Julian Vayne. And we had a great conversation, really enjoyed it. It was really cool how this was set up. Basically, I was contacted by Psychedelic Press, who published the book, and they wanted me to speak with Julian. So they were nice enough to send the book over to me, and it's awesome. You know, sometimes I don't really get a chance to read physical copies of books. I listen to a lot of audio books. Sometimes I get downloaded to my Kindle. Just a lot of digital stuff. You know, you guys know how it is. You're listening to this podcast right now. I do a lot of audio consumption. So it's nice to get a physical copy of a book. And I got to say, it's a really nice book. And, you know, I definitely I definitely geek out a lot in my podcast episodes. And you guys will be able to tell for sure. But I really do get excited. Like, I get really excited, like almost like a kid sometimes about stuff like this because it's fun, you know. It's because it's really, really fun, and this is a fun book. You know, the artwork is really cool, and it's designed really well, and so it's nice to have that. And basically, you know, I just want to talk a little bit about Julian and his book and the conversation we had, and just kind of a little bit about some things that touch on that. And you know, Julian is an occultist and author of a bunch of books, essays, journals, and he's associated with chaos magic, which I don't really have any idea what it is. I'm not in that realm, so I don't know. So it was cool to have him on and to talk to him about that, to come find out a little bit more. And he's been doing a lot of things in the psychedelic community. He's a leading contributor to the blog of Baphomet.com. I hope I said that correctly, but it's the blog of BAPHOMET.com. And of course, all the links are in the show notes attached to this episode. And he's the co-director of the Psychedelic Museum, which we spoke a little bit about, which is really fucking cool. There's a psychedelic museum. You know, there's enough psychedelic history to have a museum. So that's at psychedelicmuseum.net. And you know, honestly, I wasn't really aware of him until I was contacted by Psychedelic Press to speak with him. So it's cool, you know, it's really cool because there's so many people out there. There's so many people doing all kinds of different things that sometimes something doesn't really hit on my radar. And so it's nice to be contacted and offered an opportunity to speak to some of these wonderful people that I get a chance to speak with. And, you know, I think one of the things that I appreciate so much, you know, this book, Getting Higher, it's like a manual for exploring the use of psychedelic substances in the context of kind of like any way that you want to choose. It's like a guidebook of choosing ways to enhance the psychedelics experience, and you can use it for spirituality or self-transformation or magic. You know, and that's one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit, you know, because that's an unfamiliar kind of realm, I think, for a lot of people. And it's definitely unfamiliar for me. But as you guys know, listening to this podcast, you know, my experience with ayahuasca has led me to kind of be more of a believer, I guess, or just it's there, at least like all of us listening to this episode are open to the idea. There's a lot of people out there that are not open to the idea of magic and wonder and mystery and things that can't be quantified or explained or something like that. But as Julian puts it, there's no requirement to believe in anything other than the wonders of our own neurochemistry and the value of the psychedelic experience, trusting the value of the experience and trusting our own, you know, neurochemistry. And that's really, really cool, because if you're open into choosing to, you know, I want to say believe, but it's not really a belief, but I guess I'm just going to use the word believe because That's kind of the word that I want to use, because I feel like a lot of people do lose the sense of kind of magic and wonder in their lives, and I guess choose not to believe in that stuff because they think that it's not, maybe it's not real, or it's, we can't measure it, or whatever it is. There's this kind of materialist, reductionist mind, that manifests out of all of us. All of us human beings have a certain sense of, well, we want to make sure that things are in order, things are in control, things are, that we have a handle on things, that we can deal with things, that the world makes sense to us and that we make sense to the world. And we constantly, live our lives trying to fit into certain kinds of parameters, and we give into groupthink, and we give into kind of herd mentality, and that's kind of natural for our nature and our biology in order to survive. We have to be willing to know who to trust and when to sense danger and those sorts of things. But, I've mentioned this on podcasts in the past where I've done some solo podcasts and stuff, but it's this kind of, the psychedelic experience is almost like, being able to let go, being able to give up, surrender, submit, and trust the process of the flow of the universe, of the flow of your own, as Julian says, your own neurochemistry. Just giving that, allowing that to happen, allowing to breathe in and trust, and just, go where it takes you, and figure out and put the pieces together for yourself. And there's so many different approaches, and there's so many different paths. There's so many different ways to go about this. There's so many ways to enhance the experience through set and setting. And as we mention in this podcast, we talk about all these things. I'm not going to go further into talking about what we discuss on the podcast, but we get into all this stuff on the podcast when we're talking about the book Getting Higher, the manual Getting Higher, the Manual of Psychedelic Ceremony. That is the full title of the book. So, the other day I was watching. I watched the movie The Polar Express, and it's this animated movie that came out maybe 10 years ago with Tom Hanks, and I remember I had that hardcover book, The Polar Express, when I was a kid, and I loved that book, and this, I love that physical copy of that book. It was maybe like it was a wide book, so like 12 inches or something like that, and it had wide, big pages of pictures on both pages, and it was a crisp, thick pages in the book. Beautiful illustrations, glossy kind of winter wonderland illustrations. It was a Christmas book, and I think when I was a child, my parents would kind of bring out the Christmas books, and we would decorate the house, and it would be filled with wonderful, spectacular Christmas type stuff. And I remember just having a few books that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the art, the illustration, the look, the feel of the books. And I remember the Polar Express book had some kind of like gold emblem on it or something, like it won some kind of award or something. I don't know. I don't have the information in front of me, but I remember being like, oh, cool. It was very regal. It was very, I got like a very warm sensation from reading that book and just imagining myself as the main character, the kid, who goes on this magical journey on the Polar Express on the train and to the North Pole to meet Santa and all the elves because he doesn't believe, and then he brings back the bell, and spoiler alert, at first he doesn't hear the ring of the bell, but then he chooses to believe, and then he hears the bell, and then he comes back and he gives it to his sister, and she hears the bell. But the parents can't hear the bell because they're so far gone from living in the mystery and the wonder and choosing to believe in the magic of everything that they can't hear the bell. And then, it's sad kind of. It's a little bittersweet. The the sister who's younger, she grows older and she doesn't hear the bell anymore, but he still hears the bell. He still chooses to live in the magic, in the mystery, in the wonder, in the awe of it all. And I just thought that was kind of cool. Like, as a kid, I thought that was cool. And as a kid, I felt that. So I kind of related to it. You know, I understood. I lived in a world of imagination and magic when I was a child. I was outside playing with my brothers and you know, kids on the street, and we grew up in, you know, when I was like a child, it was the early 90s. So it was like, you know, 92, 93, around that time. We were outside all day, and we were riding bikes. I mean, we still played video games. We had, I think, Super Nintendo and Sega were probably the two video games that were very popular, and then later on I got into N64. But I lived in an immersive world of magic and mystery and wonder and awe and infinite possibility. And I know, you know, you guys can relate to this, because I think most kids who have the opportunity to grow up so lucky do. You know, in a kind of affluent suburban town, and riding our bikes all over the place, building forts in the woods, imagining that we're pirates, you know, and stuff like that, and playing all kinds of fun games. And then all of a sudden that stuff just seems kind of like, you know, that's just for kids, it's for children, and we really distance ourselves from that. We shut it down and we shut it off, and then a lot of us lose it entirely forever. We grow up to be these kind of just cold, gray, rational, logical adults that, you know, have to have everything perfectly fit in order. And, you know, we talk about all these mundane things like, oh, look at this watch I have, and look at this thing, that, you know, whatever. Oh, this gives me joy and happiness, but I'm slowly dying inside. Yeah, I mean, that's maybe my perception of a lot of people, but people do have a tendency to lose that connection. I think maybe if you continue to kind of keep your mind expanded, that you feel like that you can live in that mystery and live in that sense of wonder and that sense of magic and awe. And it's just fun, and it's interesting, and it makes life it creates a little bit more spice for life, and it makes it more fun and interesting, you know. I'm trying to come up with other words here to say, but that's really it. You know, I don't want to go too long here in the intro, but I really enjoyed that. So I think this is a good conversation, a good podcast. The book is getting higher, The Manual of Psychedelic Ceremony, Julian Vayne. Go get the book. The links are all in the show notes. It's really cool. It's designed really well, and the artwork is fantastic. And it does really kind of, it basically says, look, it's okay to allow this kind of sense of magic and wonder back into your life, and here's a manual for having fun with it, for doing it. And I think that's just really cool. It's really cool that we live in a world now where these things are becoming more and more accepted, more and more infused into the mainstream, that I can have a podcast where I interview people like this and we talk about it, and we try and push it out there to as many people as possible and spread this. And that's and that's really what I'm trying to do. So just to kind of cap that all off, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that the feelings of choosing to believe and living immersed in the mystery and the magic of life that we all shared in, and then I just kind of explained to you how I felt when I was a child, we can continue that, and I try and continue that into my life as much as possible these days. So that's it. That's my little intro rant thing, and yeah, that's it. So this podcast will be a good one. I hope you guys enjoy, and if you do, please leave me a nice rating and review on iTunes. That's like one of the best ways you can help the show, is just going on iTunes. You know, take out your phone, go to your iTunes app, you know, find Mycadelic, MIKEADELIC. You obviously know probably how it's spelled because you're listening and you're looking down at it right now. But just go on there, leave me a nice little rating and review. It's great. We got 44 ratings and reviews, so I'd love to get to 50. And the ratings and reviews, they just help so much. You know, I'm such a fan of ratings and reviews because that's what I use to find good stuff. I go on Yelp all the time and I try and find restaurants that have good ratings and reviews, and I take a look at the ratings and reviews. I see what people are saying, you know, because sometimes you can tell if somebody's just kind of bitter or angry. Maybe they left something that they it really seems kind of just not right. It doesn't really fit in with what the rest of people are saying. So it's a great way to find out what's good and what's worth sharing and stuff. So if you guys enjoy this, please just go and do that for me. That would be so helpful. And I feel so good, by the way, when I read the ratings and reviews. I mean, it's the best currency that anyone could ever have. It's just like when people say nice things about you. I mean, it's fantastic. I can't. It's like greater than any ecstasy on the planet. It's just so wonderful. So thank you so much to all of you wonderful people that go and do that. All you beautiful souls and beings and energies and manifestations of selves. Thank you. Thank you so much. And if you really want to support the show, you can go on Patreon. That's patreon.com and search for me. It's patreon.com/Mike Brank, BRANC. And you can find my page there where I'm, obviously trying to create this podcast based on the benefits of psychedelics, the psychedelic experience, cognitive liberty, big ideas in our world. And I'm not really promoting it too actively, but the page is there. If you guys feel like you want to go on there and contribute, please go do so. You can contribute anything, $1, $2, $5, whatever. I have some rewards set up on the side here, so the more you contribute, the more rewards you get. And we're going to do some cool things on Patreon because Patreon is really it's really amazing. I mean, I love releasing these episodes for free on iTunes, but Patreon, let me tell you, folks, if you enjoy the podcast that I do solo where I'm talking about, where I'm just kind of inducing a flow state and just kind of riffing on some ideas and going off like that, I got some big things planned for that because there's no censoring on Patreon. It's just I'm uploading direct audio files to Patreon. So I'm going to be able to say literally whatever I want without worrying about being restricted on YouTube, which I have for some things, and other places. So, there's a tremendous movement happening right now in the world, the psychedelic renaissance, if you want to call it that, but the emerging of new ideas and the connectivity of sharing those new ideas is what's really going to kind of, change the world, if you want to go so bold. And so to keep that open and free and to keep those ideas flowing and to keep believing in the wonder and the mystery and the magic of it all, and to live a good life and to live a truthful, meaningful way. I want to be able to say whatever I want and share it wherever I want and get it to the most amount of people as I can. So Patreon is going to be a cool way of doing that too for some episodes, and also like some special episodes where we're going to have group podcasts. Group discussion podcasts. Dave Rubin does this thing where he does the fan show. So I want to do that. I want to do a fan show. So there's tons of really cool things that are happening on Patreon. So if you guys feel like you really want to go the extra mile and get involved in this community that I'm trying to create here and add these extra benefits and provide some extra value for you guys, just go on over to patreon.com/Mike Brank. And, like I said, $1, $2, really, it's up to you. I mean, I have reward tiers here set up for $50 to $100 and so on. But, all I'm really asking for, is like $1 or $2. If everybody that listened to this show gave $1 or $2, we'd be in a fantastic place. We'd be in a really great place. And as I say on my Patreon page, I want to develop more of a studio space for myself. I want to hire some people to work for me. I want to do some more graphic design stuff, and I want to create this Mycadelic brand to be a little bit bigger. There's a lot of websites out there. There's a lot of collectives, Collective Evolution, Joe Martino, who I had on this podcast a little while ago, what he's doing with his organization, and Jason Bassler of the Free Thought Project, who I had on this podcast a little while ago, Sarah Gale of the Zendo Project. There's a lot of people that are kind of stepping up in the and having a collective group of people working together on a project. And so far, this podcast has been pretty much solo. It's just me. I do a solo podcast, I rant, and then I interview guests, but I really want to expand it. And so I got a lot of exciting ideas, a lot of big ideas, a lot of things planned for it. And I want to make it really fun. There's a lot of podcasts out there. You can listen to a lot of podcasts that talk about psychedelics and spirituality and government and politics and liberty and freedom and whatever you're interested, science, magic. There's a lot of podcasts out there. But I really want to bring this thing to a larger level, to a bigger level where it's more of a multimedia kind of personality-driven, fun environment, a very fun and cool environment. I want to get a Snapchat channel and just do a lot of big things. But we really do need your support, and if you want to show your support, like I said, just like the show, share the show, talk about it with your friends. Go on iTunes, leave a rating and review. 5-star rating and review would be great. Or go to Patreon. If you really want to go to the extra mile, go to Patreon, give $1. Give $1 a month. That's all I'm asking for, really. I mean, that's a couple cents, 2 cents or 3 cents a day. Really, some people spend $3 a day on a cup of coffee. So do the math. If you can do it, I appreciate it. If not, that's cool. We're growing this show. We're moving along. We're doing great. And I appreciate all your support. All right. Without further ado, thank you guys so much. I have some announcements, some things coming up, but I'll probably do that in the intro of the next podcast that I have. The next podcast is going to be with Casey William Hardison, and it's an amazing one. I'm psyched. We talk about cognitive liberty and a bunch of other great things. But this one was also fantastic as well, and I had an excellent time speaking with Julian Vayne. I hope you guys will be able to tell from the conversation we had, and I definitely I geek out a lot and get very excited about it. But like I said, the book is awesome. The artwork, the way it's presented, the physical copy of the book, it's just a nice book. Go get it. It's called Getting Higher, the Manual of Psychedelic Ceremony with Julian Vayne. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Julian Vayne.
Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open to us the possibility that everything we know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Or is it perception?
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity. The opportunity.
Just kind of going maybe chapter by chapter, 12 chapters. It's a nice, lovely book, by the way, and I love the art. It's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's really just like absolutely incredible. I'm such a fan of, sometimes you get these, these psychedelic books, and they're just kind of real dense, and they're real like. They're not as playful as they should be, and the artwork is all messy and it's all over the place. Yours is perfect. I love the artwork. It's like kind of this organized chaos kind of model, which I'm a huge fan of, and it's the perfect size. The book's the perfect size, and it's they got the perfect amount of chapters, and it's the perfect amount of playfulness to this subject matter. Where, in my view, is like, people are out there and they're doing stuff. We might as well educate them. We might as well inform them. We might as well give them some options, and then they can freely choose whether they should make these decisions or not, right?
That's exactly it. I mean, in terms of the story of the book, in terms of the sort of the whole thing, we're looking at that. It's something that I've been working on and off on for a number of years. I've kind of written a bunch of other stuff sort of, while this has been going on. And so what I've tried to do with Getting Higher is I've tried to create a text that's kind of that's relatively short, that's reasonably authoritative. So I mean, it's lots of people have seen this text and kind of critiqued it and given me their ideas. It's hopefully something which is kind of clear enough that people can read it like a manual. This is how to do this stuff. But it's kind of got a little bit of playfulness. It's certainly got this beautiful artwork, which Pete Loveday, who's quite a well kind of respected sort of underground kind of comic artist, particularly working in the sort of the 80s and the 90s in Britain. So I kind of it turned out that he only lived sort of a short drive away from me. So I kind of got talking with him about the project, and we commissioned him to do some artwork for it, which is fantastic, and it gives it that. And that's part of the reason for calling it Getting Higher rather than some sort of more terribly sober name like sort of, entheogenic practice for advanced practice, whatever. It's like
Systems Guide 101 to psychedelic use.
Man.
Yeah.
It's like the first summer of love ever happened. I mean, come on, it's about playfulness, and part of the thing that I'm really interested in with Getting Higher is that here are these techniques that are drawn from both contemporary practice and experiment, and they're also drawn from various kind of, let's call them indigenous native traditions who have entheogenic practice. Let's bring those things together. But part of the point of this is not just like a po-faced, let's all be spiritual on drugs, because part of the thing about many, not all, but many aspects of the psychedelic experience is that there is a joy and there is an ecstasy in that. And actually, I think that's a very valid thing to do, because that's something that feeds our souls.
Right.
When we talk about recreation, we can sort of, we kind of know it has a well-being component and stuff, but actually having the experience of, for example, sitting in a peyote ceremony, yes, it's transformative, yes, it's spiritual, yes, there are prayers, yes, there is, ritual stuff going on, but it's also really good fun. Yeah, it's really enjoyable. And I don't. One of the things in the book is I don't necessarily think that these things have to be kind of separate ways of interacting with these substances. And so we should be playful, we should be joyful, we should be thankful and pleased that even under such difficult political and legal conditions, many people have access to these substances. Many people use them very, very well, very successfully, and hopefully this book will help them do that, more or in different ways, or inspire them to do their own stuff.
Yeah, and I know it will, because it's just so beautiful. It's so beautifully packaged together. It's so nice and inviting and warm and like you said, playful but informative. And it's really, really, when you put things out there in the world like that, and like you mentioned, with this kind of turbulent time where things aren't really the way that we would maybe like them to be, it gives people a kind of a wink and a nod to come over and to look at something that's easily digestible, easily consumable, not intimidating, not threatening, but beautiful and wonderful and informative. And I think you've done that here with this book, Getting Higher, a manual for psychedelic ceremony. And so it's really it's really a much needed service. I always say that. I say this to a lot of guests because I really believe that, in the times that we're living right now, where if we want to see kind of different types of peaceful and happy and fun, because like you mentioned, I mean, whatever happened to that, right? I mean, we humans work so hard, we take everything so seriously. Let's have a little fun. Let's put a little priority and a little importance on fun. So I think by putting things out there in the world like this, it makes it okay for people to kind of, they can see that there's something out there that maybe they can connect with and they can dive into, and books like this do that. Works of art and like this do that. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased that you like the book so much, and that you can see so much in it, because it, like I say, it's taken a long time to produce, and I tried to make the thing really accessible as well. So part of the point of it is that you can be coming to these substances as a scientist, as an experimenter, somebody who wants to investigate what these experiences might be like. You might be coming to these substances with a kind of a real mission of self-transformation. There's something wrong. There's a healing that you require, that you believe that these substances might be able to help you with. You might be coming to these substances because of having encountered them in a kind of shamanistic or religious kind of context. And hopefully the book is worded in such a way that it doesn't really matter what you believe or what belief system you inhabit. If you are using these psychedelic substances, these sacraments, these medicines, these drugs, then here are techniques that will broadly work. And some of them are drawn from particular spiritual traditions, but mostly I think that they're kind of worded in a way that's just really accessible, so that anyone can do them.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and I'm a big, I'm really, I guess kind of like a fanboy of like Steve Jobs, Apple. I don't know, I just kind of got into that whole, but I really do. I mean, there is something appealing about their style and the way that they do things, and I think that your book is very stylish, and it's smooth, and it's easy to read, and it's well spaced out, and there's proper chapters and detailed instructions for things. So if you wouldn't mind, let's talk a little bit about
Sure.
some of the content that's in this great book, so people have a little bit of an idea. Maybe give them like a little teaser, or so to speak, for each kind of chapter. And like I mentioned, there's 12 chapters here, and then we can go from there. But so basically,
Cool.
we start off with a calling to the spirits, right? So there's this kind of mystical element that kind of captures us from the beginning. This kind of enchantment. You're setting the stage almost like you're the Gandalf of the psychedelic ceremony. So, take us through what this calling to the spirits is all about.
Okay, so calling to the spirits. I've just grabbed a copy of the book so I can remind myself what we've got in it. Calling to the spirits is an example of a ceremony that I did with my partner, and it's not intended for people to repeat. It's a kind of serving suggestion. So it's a slightly sort of more poetically than the rest of the book, I guess, a kind of written account of a ceremony. So ceremony. This particular one, I think, involves psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah.
And there are various examples of ceremonies that are given within the book. Some of them are, if you like, I guess, let's call them again native or traditional practices. Some of them are examples of inner world kind of journeys or meditations that one might do. Some of them are kind of full on sort of entheogenic ceremonies and examples of those. So these are punctuated throughout the book in order to give the reader a kind of a fleshed out sense of the technique that's being talked about. Because otherwise, talking about technique for me, I love to actually know, well, so what should we do? I'm really interested in technique. But equally, it's kind of nice to say, oh, this is kind of the one outcome. This is one scenario that might output. And you can see, hopefully, in that, the different techniques being used. So in that first section, in Calling to the Spirits, the whole point of it is that the book, like the psychedelic adventure, begins by just kind of clearing the deck. It begins by kind of setting the scene. It begins by in this particular instance, there's I think that we make a sort of an offering to Ganesh, which is one of the deities or imaginal entities or whatever you want to call it, that I like to use at the beginning of not every ceremony, but there's some ceremonies. So you have this god who is the god of removal of obstacles, the god of the gateway, and the god of beginnings, which is at the beginning of the book, which is also the reason that if you look on the mandala on the front, there's a picture of Ganesh dancing. So the book, I hope, is also kind of takes you through this sort of psychedelic experience, and it opens with this calling to the spirits. And the spirits that I'm talking about, I go on and I kind of explain this sort of throughout the book, is that one of the things that you get within a lot of kind of entheogenic or psychedelic either cultures, let's call them, is this idea of the medicines that you're working with, perhaps some of the experiences that you encounter as being spirits. Now, whether or not you choose to believe that spirits are like real things, they're like kind of conscious entities out there in another dimension or whatever, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that human neurology is geared to deal with other personalities. That's why the first thing we recognize as humans is a face. And so the spirits is a way of, like with the image of Ganesh that's being used, it's a way of externalizing. If you look at it at a psychological level, it's a way of externalizing an aspect of oneself or an idea, and then falling into relationship with that. So if you have a relationship with a drug, if you imagine that drug as a spirit and you think about how you would go about meeting a spirit, in the same way that you might, the way that you would meet a spirit that is a human being, having that kind of way of thinking of things is helpful. It doesn't matter if you believe it's true or not. It's a neuro hack, if we
Yeah.
about it.
To use the parlance of our time, yeah. A neuro hack, yeah.
Indeed. So calling to the spirits is that it's the opening of the book, and it's an example of the kind of entheogenic ceremonies that appear later on in the text.
Right. Yeah. No, it's fantastic. It's amazing. It's such a beautiful opening, and I really liked this part in the beginning of the book. We were talking about the intelligent use of sacred substances, that they can reveal something inside of us. We can explore. We can change ourselves, and then by doing that, we can then change the world. I mean, that's something that I feel very passionately about, and kind of what this show is all about. Is kind of the inner exploration, and then creating a better world on the outside as well. And what you were just talking about with the spirits and the manifestation of kind of the inner workings of our psyche and these sorts of things. It's so fun to attach things to that. And I think we've really lost that, and that's why, I look back at history a lot and look at all of these wonderful myths and religions and figures and spirits and all these kinds of fun and playful cultures that have popped up around use of psychedelic substances, which manifests a very kind of fun belief system into being. And specifically thinking of Hinduism or things like that, where you were speaking of Ganesh. So yeah, I mean, I really think that if we had a little bit more freedom for the individual to explore their inner realms of consciousness, then that would in turn create these kinds of new modalities, and then we can reintroduce some of these fun manifestations of spirits and entities back into our culture. I think that would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think that there's loads to unpack from that. I mean, there's that whole thing about destabilizing the imagined Cartesian difference between matter and mind, which, of course, psychedelics do amazingly well, because they are physically matter that changes our mind.
Yes,
and so
yes.
having having those kinds of experiences ambient and accepted within culture would be hugely transformative. It would be hugely stressful for a number of the kind of aspects of the status quo. But I think it's for me, it's an important project, both sort of personally and also kind of culturally, because yes, it's absolutely the case that if you change yourself and your perspective in the world, and you develop enhanced empathy, understanding, a broader perspective of your own faults and abilities, all of those things that the psychedelic experience can provide for us potentially, if we engage with it in a useful, supportive kind of a way, that transforms you. That transforms all your interactions with all the other people that you have, all the economic interactions that you have, all the social interactions that you have. The sexual ones, the spiritual ones, all of that stuff changes. You don't even have to believe in some kind of magic woo-woo kind of quantum stuff, which is completely cool. I'm happy to do that sort of thing. But just pragmatically, as we transform ourselves and our relationships with others, that transforms the world. Yeah.
Right.
And psychedelics are one of the most powerful technologies to allow us to do that, particularly when they are, and this is the kind of one of the reasons I use this term. It's obviously, it comes from, or I'm informed by the sort of Native American traditions where we talk about medicine, because the medicine is this thing of the psychedelic triangle of setting, and substance. And if we can create the medicine, we know that we can heal people of PTSD. We know that we can heal people of alcoholism. It may be possible, if we are dealing with this in a non-pathological kind of sense, that we may be able to heal much broader aspects of our culture if more people are engaging with the medicine. So I think that's something to do.
Yeah, and it's important to have this kind of I feel grateful that we live in this kind of renewed psychedelic renaissance time right now, where there's
Yeah.
more and more research being done. We see more and more people kind of venturing down to the jungles to participate in ayahuasca ceremonies, and I myself have done that, and just more and more exploring. And I think humans are naturally explorers, and naturally when we explore, we need some maps and some guides for that exploration, so we do it the right way, so we can enhance it and tweak it and use it to the best of our ability in the way that we're meant to do, and which is our God-given birthright, or however you want to see it in terms of that context. But yeah, but you mentioned this is what I feel is so important, and this is a part of the beginning of your book, is the psychoactive triangle. You get right into it. This is kind of right after the intro. It's like, let's talk about one of the most crucial and important things. One of the things that they found out fairly quickly in the early 60s when it started to blow up. I was just reading a lot of kind of Tim Leary stuff and Ram Dass, Richard Alpert stuff here, and how the use of set and setting was so important, and that was something that they seem not to really be able to put together in a real serious way. But I think now that we have this kind of psychedelic renaissance happening, and it's being kind of it's seeping into the mainstream more and more. It seems like every day I see more articles and more things like this. So let's talk a little bit about this psychoactive triangle that you speak about in your book with set, setting, and substance.
Okay, so we've got the substance, we've got the drug. What is it you're going to be using? And obviously, in the book, there's without banging on about the whole health and safety thing, because people are generally intelligent and aware of these things. It's like, okay, do your research, find out about the substance, find out about how it varies in terms of its administration. All of that sort of stuff. What's the sourcing of this material? How ethical, how comfortable are you with it, and so on. And then it comes down to, set and setting. So this was, the big news really from kind of Leary's work and his colleagues. And the thing about set and setting now is that we have two other great strands of information, which were kind of sort of available to at the first wave of, LSD research, but are very, very clearly available now. So we have new research coming out through things like fMRI studies, particularly the ones that happened last year in Britain.
Was it?
So we've got much more
from
detail.
Dr.
It was
David Nutt and the Beckley Foundation. Yeah.
Yes, I think it was from Robin Carr Harris and various other people. Yeah, so we've got that imperial study, and we've got the data from that, and some of the other psilocybin and various other things. So we've got this kind of
what's
really
not to cut you off, but I just want to throw this in there real quick. It's pretty funny, Julian, and I'm sure you could probably agree with me on this. Is like whenever these studies come out, and I people who have taken LSD, or people who have smoked cannabis or whatever, and you see these studies like, LSD can make you happier, and it's like, well, yeah, duh, LSD can cure depression. It's like, no shit,
it's true. I mean, I think there are several things there. I'm work with as part of the wider committee on a thing called Breaking Convention, which is a big kind of psychedelics conference, which is coming up at the end of June. Here in London, in Greenwich.
Great.
And so I'm kind of reasonably close to some of the people who are kind of doing this research and the ongoing story. And the interesting thing, of course, is that there are a number of layers to the research. So one layer is pragmatically every single time someone gets a license to research one of these chemicals, that's a good thing. And frankly, they could be like, just repeating the same, and this has been done, the same toxicology studies that were being done, in the 50s, and it's going to be the same data. But every time that license is granted, it makes it easier for the next person and easier for the next person, and then eventually we can start to get to more cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
The second thing about it is that very often the research, the stated aim of the research will be one thing, but there will be a whole bunch of other research that's taking place on top of it, which is much more interesting and won't be published for a few years. So, for example, my partner Nikki was involved in doing some research where she was injected with DMT for science, and they did an electroencephalograph of her brain waves, and that's the data they were looking at. And they were looking at things like they're looking at, how does this stuff get metabolized in the body? What's its toxicity? Frankly, we know all this. That's all known. What's more interesting is that on top of this, but they're also asking a lot more interesting questions about the subjective experience. There's other aspects to the research that are going on as well. So we're seeing at the moment the blunt instrument end of all of that, but there's much more interesting stuff in the pipeline over the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
As well as that research aspect, and yes, isn't it funny that we kind of get reports that say, do you know that, LSD can make you appreciate music in a different way? No shit.
Yeah. Right.
But as well as that, the other strand that we've got in terms of the set and setting is that we've got a much better understanding and a much better engagement, and we are now members of this global medicine community. So lots of those people who had the technology of using ayahuasca or using peyote, lots of those groups are now globalized. Yeah, so you've got kind of Huichol Indians coming over to Europe and running ceremonies. You've got kind of like Native American people, working with people in different parts of the globe. So the technology of holding the space, the technology of set and setting, which was these various ritual approaches, some of which are more or less embedded within a kind of a religious framework or a shamanic framework or whatever. So today, what we've got, and what I hope I've been able to kind of express a bit within the book, is that we've got this lovely kind of confluence of all of the new research that's coming out, and the new and finer grain understanding of how psychedelics work in the brain. And we've also got this kind of massive now corpus of knowledge culturally about how we hold psychedelic space. Also, as a culture, we've gone through two waves of it. If I think of Western culture, we learned how to hold the space of LSD to some extent. We invented things like music festivals for that purpose.
Right.
And then what happened was MDMA happened, and we created a thing called the rave, which is another way of holding that space. So as cultures, we're actually starting to learn something ourselves, having been cut off from our psychedelic traditions for whatever reason, at whatever point in history you want to pick. And so I think that now the idea of setting and substance, we can really articulate that. We can really understand the pharmacology of these things. We can really understand the individual neurological, psychological processes that go on. And we can also look very much at the kind of setting and be informed by those kind of indigenous traditions and those experiments that have happened in Western culture over the course of the last 70 or so years.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such an important thing to be studied, and it's just like, it's almost in a way where, I was joking where it's saying like, oh, duh,
Sure.
We know these things make us happy or whatever, but it's almost like, the human beings we need. There's a part of us that we have to work with, that kind of yin yang effect where it's like there's that constant pushing and pulling back and forth where the rational, logical mind needs to understand things that can't really be understood, and then there's the people that don't really need to understand. They can just kind of venture out, open up their soul, be guided by their intuition, that sort of thing. So it's that balance between the two, that kind of that dance, so to speak, between the two, that kind of fuels the progress that we're making.
Sure, and some of it is also a lot of this has to be really seen as a kind of realpolitik tactic. So if we're going to change the way that psychedelics are seen in our culture, one of the things that we have to do is we have to be able to present compelling information and evidence about how these things work in the brain, and we also have to demonstrate what we already know, which is their healing potential. So that's why people like MAPS have been doing the amazing stuff that they've been doing with post-traumatic stress disorder and MDMA as a breakthrough psychotherapeutic agent, because we know, and we can go and look at the ethnography of the cultures that use these things, like the Huicholi people and like some of the Native American Plains people and so on. We know that these things are beneficial, but now we can absolutely prove it. It is, of course, a great irony that MDMA, a drug that makes people love each other, essentially, to tolerate each other more and enjoy music, that drug is actually coming back into culture through the fact that we've managed to send so many of our armed forces into various conflict zones that we now have, a huge veteran population who are, many of whom are deeply troubled by their experiences. And so it's the engine of war that has allowed the medicine of love to come back into our culture. But this is a strategy. Lots of those people who are working in those fields, including people like MAPS, would like to see a broader model than just a medicalized model of how these substances can be used. But who knows how this works out in terms of the historical narrative cut to 20 years time, and we'll discuss it.
Right.
But at least at the moment, that's a tactic, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just such a sad, tragic thing to have happen where, we've let our human insanity get so out of control to the point where, here in the U.S., I mean, we've been in Afghanistan for years, all these wars and these terrible, horrible things that have to happen to a human being. And then you have these poor guys coming back, these soldiers, and here in the stats are 22 suicides a day, which is it adds up to more people more soldiers or veterans rather killing themselves than actually being killed in the line of duty. Yep. And it's just so sickening. And in this weird, ironic way, it's almost like this sick, tragic war and this loss of human life and this torture is birthing this love and this empathy and this really deep intention that people have to do things like venture to the Amazon jungle for healing and for therapy and for therapeutic opening up and all this kinds of stuff and with the things that MAPS are doing. I mean, so in a way, we're almost like the rebellion of maybe the 60s kind of tightened the grip on that war and made that war machine even stronger and more vicious and shut it all down. Now there's kind of a reemerging on the other side because it's like, we can't take it anymore. We're destroying the planet. We're destroying each other. We need some kind of introduction to love and empathy here. And so I really believe that is emerging and that the transition is happening. The tide is turning. Hopefully Trump doesn't blow up the world, something like so. We could just hope and pray and have faith.
Man, that's a really, really, really hopeful, fantastic vision, and I would sign up to it immediately. Yeah. And yes, allowing for that last sentence, maybe this is the thing that kind of pulls us through. Yeah, we as a series of cultures do respond to war, if nothing else. So perhaps the fact that there's a war going on in the psyche of many people, and that the mental health of our culture is seriously compromised, which one might argue that perhaps the election of Donald Trump is an example of that.
Yes, it is. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, if that allows us to kind of push through into something better, then yeah, absolutely sign me up, Mike.
Right, yeah, it's just strange that that's the way that things work in this kind of almost creative destruction kind of way, where there has to be almost a death of the old order for the new order to emerge, and the part of the old order is they're playing certain sets of games, and one of the things that you talk about in your book is playing games, and it's like if we human beings can realize that we can kind of look at things from a perspective of gameplay, and when we grow to maybe learn to love each other a little bit more and open up and stop with the kind of aggressive games that we're playing, then we can do all these other kinds of things where we can explore all these new realms and all these new possibilities. And I think that's in one of the chapters in your book with the adventures into the ultra world.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, obviously, I subscribe to the sort of the Bill Hicks model of what we need to do is explore inner and outer space together forever. That would be, that's obviously what we need. That's the sort of the intention of it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I think is really interesting in terms of this idea of kind of exploration. And one of the things that I put in the book, I think actually sort of fairly early on, it kind of says, look, there's lots of reasons why you might want to take drugs, and it says you might want to you might just believe that the unexamined life is not worth living, like Socrates says, you need to go and check that out, or you might want healing, or you might want to explore a numinous experience or whatever. But people take psychedelic drugs in large part to find out what it's like, to explore this kind of this territory, and is that explore that desire to explore and to thwart that at a psychological, mental, cultural level in the way that legislation currently does, is deeply, deeply wrong. cognitive liberty and all that.
Yes.
Surely. Yeah.
Yeah. So quickly, maybe touching on that, with cognitive liberty, I feel like, I guess I don't know if it's really been, I guess I could say with confidence, maybe it's not really the most popular meme right now, but I feel that it's pretty popular, and I think it's pretty important to talk about. And so what is it like in the UK? Because a lot of people will make this connection with this kind of strange obsession, almost American obsession with the liberty and individualism. These are very American values, but I don't know. I kind of think that maybe that's true, but I kind of think that all people desire some form of liberty and freedom. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that? And what's
Sure.
what's the current climate in the UK right now?
Oh man, it's really, really confused. Unsurprisingly, aside of the kind of the bizarre political things that are happening at a governmental level, you have the last year was passed a brilliant piece of legislation called the Psychoactives Bill, which essentially criminalised any psychoactive substance at all. So it made it a criminal offence for a vendor to sell you something if they believed that you were going to get high on it, with the exceptions, of course, of alcohol and tobacco and chocolate, whatever. So we have a situation where obviously psychedelics are freely available. Some of them grow in the landscape relatively easily. They can be ordered by incantations on the dark web, I understand. So people have got this stuff. But equally, if you go into a shop and you happen to look like you might be a young person trying to purchase some nitrous oxide, even if you are legitimately going to try and, I don't know, use it for, cake decorating or whatever it is people apparently use it for, then you can't. Then if the vendor believes that you're going to use it for a psychoactive purpose, they shouldn't sell it to you. They'd be breaking the law were they to do so. So we have this, and this was a piece of legislation enacted in order to catch a lot of the kind of, particularly the synthetic cannabinoids, but various other kind of legal high drugs, some of which undoubtedly had ended up when people had problematic relationships with them, and they become associated with various groups of people. So it was a way of kind of cutting that off, but actually it's a hilarious piece of legislation. They had to write specifically to Catholic churches to tell them that incense would be fine, and that's not a problem. Because frankincense has a mood altering quality in terms of the definition given in the Act. It's a psychoactive. Theoretically, you shouldn't be selling it if people are getting high on it.
It is really a humorous thing, though, when you think about it. It seems almost arbitrary and just foolish and silly, because you're talking about things that maybe alter your consciousness or whatever in a certain kind of way. I mean, why not make cake illegal? You know what I mean? It's like you're getting a sugar rush. It's like, well, but certain, because we're talking ultimately we're talking about the individual and their inner experience and what happens to you when you consume something and you put that into your body, whether it's something that alters your mind, or it's something that alters your blood sugar, or it's something that alters your digestive bowel movements, or whatever it is, makes you perspire, and or any way that there's some kind of reaction that happens when you ingest something into your body. The fact that there could be a legislation about that is extremely silly to me, and really there's this tragic thing that's happening where we're preventing people from exploring themselves and this inner discovery and this inner journey. And you talk about this in your book with, the ways that we can go about cultivating an experience to have, blissful inner journeys and inner experiences. And like you mentioned before, I love that Bill Hicks exploring the inner space and outer space together. But that is one of the most crucial elements. So I guess, I don't know, maybe let's talk a little bit about some of that stuff, like, the kind of inner exploration techniques and the kind of things that the inner journey can provide you with.
Okay, so you're going to take some drugs. You're going to take a psychedelic. You're going to kind of engage with this experience, and the way that the book works is it talks about various ways that you might do that, depending to some extent on the substance that you're using. So if it's a short-acting substance, you might, if it's DMT, for example, you might sort of sit together and just take turns, using the pipe, and maybe use some music. And there are examples given about the kind of, shamanic styles of singing that you might experiment with, or, other techniques you could use to kind of hold the space. But you can also do things like, so in the book, one of the sort of inner world kind of guided journey things that's given is like a meditation on life and death and breath.
Right.
And it's just it's a meditation that's just written within a kind of Carl Sagan style envelope of the language of science. So it talks about how our bodies, ultimately come from these aeons, dead stars, which, in a sense breathed out, they expanded and pushed all the atoms that we're now composed of, sitting here in this moment, breathing. So it's a way of kind of bringing attention to how, how utterly, literally awesome and sublime is the very fact that, you're sitting here breathing in and out.
Right.
So a lot of the techniques are kind of like that. Some of them are quite are about holding whole ritual space. Some of them are quite light touch. So, for example, there is breathwork techniques that are given, and there are techniques of say taking an intention that you might have a particular, I don't know, aspect of yourself you want to work on. Let's imagine it's a psychological kind of thing, and then encoding that into a word or into a mantra, into a sound, and then just using that when you're out clubbing on the dance floor. So when you're in that, what amounts to a sacred moment, a special magical moment, then deploying the technique there, and then just having a nice evening. Yeah. So the book provides these kind of like meditative things. You can kind of just, you could record these. I think on the blog site that I've got, there's an audio version of that particular meditation. There are things that are kind of formal sort of ceremonies that you can have, and there are also examples of kind of practices that you could drop in to whatever it is, that you're doing when you're tripping.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. It really is, because I kind of subscribed to the school, a while ago, I guess maybe 6-7 years ago or so, when I first started experimenting with, psychedelics and whatnot. I got into the kind of Terence McKenna school of just blast your brains out, and you don't really, it was just kind of like, you don't really need to do anything because the substance does it all for you. It's just like, you don't need, I remember he was giving this like famous speech that's been on YouTube and clipped up and all this stuff about like, you don't have to, bow your head and be shuffled around by beady-eyed little men and breathe in certain ways, and it just works. You just take it and it works. So I kind of but then as I grew and as I got older and had more and more experiences, I learned that it is useful to kind of be able to develop some kind of set and tools and practice, and then, like you said, to be able to have this kind of like psychedelic minded toolkit where you can employ it into situations and use kind of breath work and mindfulness practice. And that's such an important thing. One of the things that I remember from an early LSD trip is like, all of a sudden when it came on, it's like, oh, the world is like alive and breathing now. So the breath is such an important thing. And as I've gotten older in my journey, like I just started to get into this kind of breath work and doing the Wim Hof method practice of breathing and doing meditation and focusing on the breath. And so it's so important. And
I mean, sure, Terence, bless him. I mean, he, peace be upon him. I mean, I really like Terence McKenna's work. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. But I think also, yes. Okay, so let's take another example. Let's imagine. Let's take his example. You're working with mushrooms. Yes, it is absolutely possible to take 5 grams of psilocybin in silent darkness, and there is a value in that experience. I would certainly, there's no way that I would deny that. There's also a value in taking perhaps a lower dose and going to a really astonishing, beautiful environment for a party with your friends where you will be dancing and you'll be interacting. There's a value in that experience as well. Mm-hmm. There's a value in microdosing. There's a value in abstinence. I'm not a huge fan of the notion of a heroic dose, because I think that as I've said before to other people, if I told you that I'd taken a heroic dose of whiskey and I found that I would vomited all over myself and my friends, I wouldn't expect you to applaud. Oh, well done for taking a big load of whiskey. You know, that's not the interesting thing. And the interesting thing about Terence McKenna was not the fact that he was a person taking 5 grams of psilocybin in silent darkness. It's what came out is what he as a shaman was able to then to bring to the world, to bring to culture and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And if he had managed to do that by taking a very low dose of something, that would make no difference either. It's the output that is important in that instance.
Right.
But I think that if you think about the nature of psychedelics, if you take enough of anything, you'll find that your memory will be impaired. So you won't remember the experience, or you'll only remember portions of it. Now, that may have a kind of a deep psychological kind of or embodied, healing or beneficial process. But being able to remember what's going on and being able to kind of cognize and sometimes being able to interact with the environment in which you find yourself. So if, for example, you take a lower dose of something and you go to a museum or you go to an art gallery, you will have that kind of experience. Yes, you could take 5 times the dose and sit in a darkened room. That's fine too. But I wouldn't necessarily privilege one above the other.
Oh, this is good, because this just reminded me of what you were talking about actually before we were recording, when you were talking about the theater space and the, kind of creating these cathedral-like, theatrical spaces that foster a kind of natural, almost psychedelic experience, or can even enhance one's psychedelic experience just by being in this kind of setting of awe and majesty and wonder, right? I mean, you said something so nice before we recorded about this, yeah.
It's also about sort of how human beings respond to this experience. So, I mean, yes, you could you could take a mind-shatteringly large dose and just be in silent darkness. But if you look at the the cultures that make use of mushrooms or ayahuasca or whatever, then there is these very often huge artistic kind of outputs that come in the form of shipibo textiles, or they come in ritual beadwork, or they come in, people output, they want to express this experience in whatever way, whether it's kind of, groovy fractal t-shirts, or whether or not it's kind of something that doesn't look psychedelic on the surface, but is nevertheless informed by an engagement with those kinds of things. And humans always do this. Humans always create ritualized sacred spaces. We create these astonishing theaters with, their Rococo designs, and where there's a curtain over the screen. There's no reason to have a curtain over the screen in a theater, in a cinema.
Yeah.
There's no, it's not like actors are going to appear behind it or have to, shuffle through it. It's there because this is part of the ritual space that we're creating. We're creating something that emerges in first as theatre and then becomes cinema, where we share this kind of collective dreaming, which we call film.
Yeah.
Which is this astonishing transformative technology. And there's another example. I mean, things like film, things like light, things like music, all this stuff, when we engage with those things with psychedelics or with natural environments, we get so much out of that experience, And Terence McKenna is right in as much as of course you don't need some guy leading you through this, because you can do this autonomously. If you've got the techniques, if you've read around the internet, maybe you've read the stuff that I've put in this book, you can develop these techniques yourself. You don't have to buy into any big religious system. You don't have to buy into any particular way of thinking about the world. But you and maybe your affinity group can do this stuff, because the basic techniques of creating those supportive, beautiful environments, for instance, or those basic techniques of bringing attention to something and bringing kind of a focus and an awareness into whatever it is you're doing, that stuff is the same throughout all of these religions and throughout all of these cultures. And we can mine that technology and we can press it into the service of our autonomous spirituality.
Yeah, it really is so fascinating when you get into all the nitty gritty of everything and get granular with this, and you're talking about when you're talking about the shipibo patterns and the art and everything being created from that space, and Terence and Dennis McKenna's vision when they went down to La Torrera to experiment and find things to bring something back from the psychedelic realm. I mean, that is essentially what we're seeing with this happen, being the artwork being informed, as you said, by these psychedelic experiences, and then we're projecting that into the the world with this beautiful collective kind of dream and visionary state. And something that you talk about in the book is this, the power of visualization and the power to kind of, it's really like creating your own world. And I think that that's something that's so important for individuals to have the freedom to do, and to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like empowered to trust in themselves and to visualize and manifest things for themselves, and have their own personal kind of way of relating to the experience. And you talk about these, finding like a power object. Can you talk a little bit about that kind of visualizing and that kind of practice?
Okay, so I would imagine a number of people who are listening are going to be aware of things like a kind of shamanic journeying technique, let's call it that.
Yeah.
So where you have something like a drum, a simple drum rhythm, and the instructions are normally that you just kind of relax, go into the drum rhythm. Eventually you will find a magical doorway of some description, which could be anything, could be a crack in the sidewalk, could be a hole in a tree. You'll pass through that and you'll find yourself somewhere, and in that somewhere, eventually there's your magic animal, or your power animal, or your totem animal, or whatever we want to call it. So this is this basic technique, this idea of kind of going into the unconscious, going into what some people rather poetically call the deep mind, which is a term I rather like. So it sounds sexier than unconscious, subconscious. So you go into the deep mind. You go into this kind of, this meditative, reflective, but also kind of free associative kind of state. And you use, in that particular instance, the thing that induces the alter state of consciousness is drumming. Now, of course, what you can do is you can take a technique like that and you can add, usually not a quotes heroic dose, but some of a psychedelic. And you can use these techniques, you can use those kind of methods that you see within the kind of shamanic traditions with these substances, unsurprisingly, because although there are undoubtedly forms of shamanism that are less engaged with entheogens, frankly, most of them are to some extent. So a lot of these technologies, a lot of these methods of going into the unconscious in order to perhaps obtain something, to obtain a symbol, to obtain something that represents an idea that perhaps you'll only later understand, those things can be tremendously valuable. And they allow people to just, the technique is really simple. It's really stripped down. You don't have to believe in anything other than the wonder of your own neurochemistry. That's all you have to, try this stuff out, see if it works for you. If it doesn't, abandon it, try something else.
Yeah. So what are some things I'm interested in learning maybe a little bit about? I guess let's talk a little bit more about kind of this kind of the magical element of it. Like, I guess we've been pretty much touching on this the whole time, but I want to get a little bit deeper into that, because that's something that's kind of more of a territory that I'm unfamiliar with, is kind of, like occult magic or wizardry or source. I'm so far out of that field that I don't really have that much information. So what can maybe you tell some, talk about that kind of element of it?
Yeah. Okay, so my background is that I describe myself as an occultist. So I'm interested in mysterious stuff. I'm interested in the limits of human experience in a variety of different ways. And I'm a magician in as much as I utilize magic. And magic for me is the technology of the imagination. So it is sometimes stuff that appears to look a bit like psychology. Sometimes it's stuff that appears to look a little bit like religion or various other types of spiritual practice. And what it boils down to mostly is it's about exploring the imagination and the relationship between my everyday experience in the world and all the other entities that that I encounter in the world, like people, objects, whatever. So rather than trying to kind of turn the imagination down and try to get like an intrasubjective agreement about what the world looks like, which is what we do in science, or to take the imagination and try and sort of remove it, which is what you might do in, say, a martial arts practice, where you don't want to second guess your opponent, but only respond to exactly the incoming stuff. Instead of doing those two types of process, you opt for a third process, which is to say that the imagination, the room in which I'm standing at the moment is mostly constructed in my imagination. So I know that there's the sensory information that's incoming, but what stitches it together is it's stitched together in this imaginal space. So I'm going to actively work with that. So I'll use things like visualization. I can visualize something in the room that isn't actually there, but then it is effectively there because it's in the imaginal world. Mm-hmm. And there are various ways that you can think about magic, but one way to think about it is a technology of the imagination that allows us to increase the limits of our achievable reality. So we look at the things that we want to achieve for ourselves and for those people around us. And this may not need be tedious, pragmatic things like I want a new job, but equally it might be. And we look at how we can skillfully use these techniques of the imagination to extend the limits of what we're capable of doing as people.
Right.
And that's kind of so lots of things like, I don't know, like NLP or hypnosis or whatever. Some of these are elements of what was previously described as magic up until the last couple of hundred years. Some of the kind of scientific processes of actually observing the world and using our relationships with the world as our primary source of knowledge rather than a religious text. That's an aspect of magic. Utilizing techniques that change consciousness in order to affect the imaginal space. So whether that's breath work, whether that's ritual, ceremony, drama, use of entheogens, any of these sorts of things, that's also like another aspect of it.
Yeah.
In the book, magic sort of appears in that as an element within it, because that's kind of my background. And I came to psychedelics much later, after having done years and years of various types of magical practice, and then I was really interested in how we create rituals, how we create spaces to kind of hold these experiences that I was encountering with psychedelics.
Right. Wow. That's very interesting, and it is almost strange that, I guess, for somebody who isn't really familiar with this world, to them it might sound like maybe woo-woo-y or something kind of far out or something like that. But really, when we think about it, we're engaged in magic right now. I mean, the mere fact that I'm able to communicate with you right now through this wonderful thing we call the internet, and this microphone that I'm talking into, and the symbols that the images that I'm forming in my head of thoughts that are coming out in forms of symbols that are language, and I'm kind of casting spells as so to speak as I talk, and then you interpret that. So it's really, we encounter this stuff in our waking lives. We create the world out of magic is really what it is. But I think for the kind of layman, for the person who's not really tuned into this frequency, it seems almost like too fantastical for them. But when you stop and think about it, it's totally legitimate and totally real.
I mean, if we think, look at it. We pass symbols between ourselves that represent value, which we call money, and we don't even make them physical these days. We make them kind of these abstract representations. Fundamentally, we're imaginal creatures. The technology that, of the phone network that we're currently using to communicate, those technologies, all of those things are very, very much informed by magical ways of thinking of the world. And you only have to Technosis by Eric Davis, I think, is the book that I would probably recommend. In that respect,
Mm-hmm.
to sort of grok some of that. This is kind of what we're talking about here. We are symbol making and meaning making creatures. And what magic does, and there's kind of loads of different versions of it, and I've just got my particular take on this thing. It has all these kind of different symbol sets and all these different sort of styles. But what they boil down to for me is they boil down to attempts to change consciousness, and to use the technology of that change of consciousness in the imaginal world to do something. And it's the doing, I think, that's the interesting thing, in the sense that I think when people have a kind of a naive view of magic, they imagine that people who practice it must have either terribly good luck and spend all their time winning the lottery and all these sorts of things. Were that to be true, that would be fantastic. Mm-hmm. But actually, what it's more about is this kind of the developing of this kind of imaginal world, this imaginal way of thinking about the universe, so that you have this kind of interconnectivity between things, and you can be, one hopes, more responsive to, environmental cues. You can be, perhaps, one hopes, more in touch with what's going on at the sort of the deeper levels of oneself, and you can, one hopes, use that in order to have, a really a life, a style of being which is authentic and which is good for you and good for those people around you, which is an enabling thing. It allows you to address your difficulties and your problems and the ongoing hassles that we have just as human beings. So some people kind of, have a very kind of religious styled version of this. Some people have a very kind of psychological styled version of this. And yeah, obviously, when you see all the clutter on some freakish altar going on here, what's going on here is manipulation of the imaginal world by that practitioner. And they may imagine that in lots of different ways. That's just, the language I like to use to describe what's going on.
Now, I think that what's your experience with in the book you kind of talk about sitting for people and kind of creating a space and maybe having someone who facilitates an experience for someone who wants to kind of be, I guess, more of like a psychonaut kind of person, having that person there, the kind of responsibility that goes along with that. So there's kind of good aspects of that, making sure that you find someone that you trust and who's right for you, but also there's also some dangers in that, maybe in people that maybe if they don't do the proper research or get informed, that they can get into some kind of situation where there maybe is someone who doesn't have the best intentions, trying to do something energy sucking or something like that. What's your experience with that?
Okay, so I've been very, very fortunate in as much as all of the groups and the individuals that I've worked with have all had, they've been fantastic. They've been amazing, and I've never had any kind of causes for concern. But equally, yeah, when you take a psychedelic, you're placing yourself in a vulnerable situation. Yeah, so. You need to be just really thoughtful about who you're going to do that with. If you're going to kind of cross continents and go and hang out with a shaman, you better have like some idea about who this person is. Or if this person's going to come and sit with you while you take a high dose of, let's imagine you're going to do the silent darkness and 5 grams, but you just happen to think that having someone else in the building might be a good plan. Make sure that person knows what's going on. Make sure that they know how to operate. Make sure you trust them. Right. Obviously. This is, I guess, when we're talking about spirits, we have to talk about the spirit of the person with whom you're going to take the trip, whether they're taking the same substance or not, and just be a little bit thoughtful about that, because you're opening yourself up at potentially quite a kind of intimate level. So it's important to trust those that you're with.
Right. Yeah. No, very, very important, definitely. And out of that you can gain, there could be so much to be gained out of that, as well, having kind of, I don't want to say a guru or anything, but just people that are around that you can kind of, it could be like your buddy or someone like that. And then you can kind of get a really good sense of exploration and good use out of that. Now, So yeah, I think look, we covered a lot of stuff. Maybe we didn't get into every little thing, but as we kind of close in on about an hour here, I was wondering, is there anything that you wanted to kind of communicate in terms of what you created this book and so Getting Higher, the Manual for Psychedelic Ceremony. What do you hope that people get out of it, and what do you hope that they do with it? And then on top of that, there's a 3-part question. Where do you see the kind of future going, and where do you hope to see things going?
Oh, okay. All really good stuff. What do I hope for? What do I hope for the book? I'm really hopeful that it gets out there to people, that they enjoy reading it, that they enjoy the experience of that. And I really hope it helps to inspire them and maybe inform them in terms of their own practice. So, I would really, really like to have, I don't know, my imagined future goal for something like this book would be to get, a couple of emails coming through saying, "Oh, we used some of the ideas. It was really helpful. It was brilliant." Because it isn't, it's an offering to the community. I'm not doing this to get rich. This is not going to kind of pay all the bills. So I'm really hopeful that people find it useful. I did a talk at the university in Canterbury a little while ago at the Psychedelic Society there, and a group of students came up to me, so 20 some young undergraduate students, 20 or so, and they said, "Oh, we're interested in this stuff, and we have kind of encountered these materials, but we don't really know about like any shamans to go to or anything like this." And I said, "Guys, hold fire. There's a book that I hope will come some way towards answering your need." So I'm hoping that people like that, maybe experienced practitioners who want to kind of just reflect on their own practice as well, will read the book and will benefit from it. Yeah, so it's a kind of an offering to the community, and I hope it works out in that kind of in that way for people.
Yeah, and definitely, just real quickly, I just want to touch on that. But you're saying like the younger kids, I'm 30, and like people younger than me, I mean, they message me, and it's just such a great feeling to know that you have that you're providing something of value for people, that you're giving people another option to educate themselves and to have, to use something. Someone might pick up this book and might change their life. They might be profoundly influenced by what you've put down here. So to offer that service, especially to the younger crowd of people who are exploring and picking out where they want to go with their lives and just doing, thinking big ideas. When you're young, you're in college, you're ambitious, and you're filled with idealism and hope and all this stuff. So to provide them with such a beautiful artistic and comprehensive book of education is a service in itself. And so I just wanted to add that to what you were saying. So then what where in your like, I guess I try to ask this question to a lot of people when they come on the show, but it's like I want to know like what would your ideal world look like? Like what do you want to see the future like, and how do you want to see things unfold? I want to get a kind of a inside Julian's brain for the vision of your perfect kind of world, because isn't that, I think it's fascinating to think about, if things were more free and open, what kind of world we could have.
I think we would have potentially a world where without it being at the expense of other people, pleasure and fun would be valued and celebrated. I think we could have a world where we manage our resources much more successfully and share things much more equitably across the planet. I think we could have a world which would allow us to behave more intelligently and compassionately in relation to ourselves and each other and all the rest of the species that we share the planet with, and then we explore inner and outer space together forever. That's what I would like. Yeah. And I think in terms of, if we go fine grained to the psychedelic experience, what I would like to see is changes in the culture and changes then in legislation, which made these experiences more accessible in a more supported way for more people. Because I think that these things can be really powerful medicines. So if you're a veteran with PTSD, you should be able to get psychotherapy with MDMA because it's going to really work. And if you're a young person who wants to explore what it means to be who they are, and you want to be able to have the experience of a supported psychedelic session, you should be able to go and get that. And if you want to go to a party and you just want to get a bit stoned with your friends, I would like to see that as being possible as well.
Right.
And the way we go about doing that, the tactics that we use, whether we use licensing, whether we go primarily for a medical model, whether we talk about cognitive liberty and we really stress that as a sort of a human right, whether or not we decide that we're going to go through the process of looking for a kind of a religious acceptability for these things. There are many ways that we might change this particular situation for our culture, but we must do it, and we will.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. I am with you with that. You're a part of this movement that we have now, where we're moving the needle a little bit more to the side that we want it to be on. We're slowly, averting the disaster of the Titanic hitting the iceberg. We've seen that happen before in history, and now we're all grabbing the wheel and we're steering it in a different direction. And I think that is happening. And part of what you're doing that's so wonderful, Julian, is with your books and your work, specifically this one that we've been talking about in the podcast, Getting Higher, providing readers with this safe, useful kind of field guide, these techniques to engage in with these plants and these substances. And what that does is not only educate people, but it limits the fear and the stigma and the demonization around these things. And I think that human beings often fear what they don't understand, and by providing them with more understanding in the way that you're doing here, is lessening that fear and is saying basically it's okay to come out and play and prioritize these things, and out of those things we'll not only learn about ourselves, but we'll actually improve our environments and each other in the process. And so, thank you so much for your contribution to this movement and to this effort and to doing that. And I think this book does that, and it really is the perfect kind of field guide and pocket manual that people can use for this sort of thing. And then we can, lessen the fear, and we can create a new environment of understanding. And when I was talking earlier before about with looking at some Leary stuff and back in the day, and recently Nick Sand had passed away, this famous Orange Sunshine chemist, and they were talking about when the laws changed, and it really affected the set and setting, and now all of a sudden, instead of having this beautiful experience, now you were paranoid that you were going to get people were going to kick down your door, and when people hear about drugs, they think these criminals that are in the streets smoke. So by creating beautiful works of art like what you're doing here, and by coming on my show to talk about it and to explain it in such a poetic way that you have this entire show, is really helping to lessen that fear, destigmatize that, and provide people with the proper education, useful, safe techniques they need to explore this wonderful, magical thing we call life.
Mike, thank you very, very much for inviting me on the show. I mean, I'm fortunate to have my name on the front of the book, but I'm only there by dint of having many, many fantastic sort of teachers and friends and guides and advisors and allies and people who've, I've, as far as I can, understood their ideas and understood their techniques, taken my own experience and kind of put it out there. There's lots more to come from lots of people on this subject about how we create the medicine for our culture, how we integrate the substance and the set and the setting, and of course that has to include changing the set that many of us enter these experiences from, which is I am breaking the law now. I'm doing something that could get me arrested.
Right.
So that has to change, because we know these things can be beneficial. We know these things can be medicines. They can be medicines for us and for our culture. Mm-hmm. So if this book goes any way towards kind of helping to break the fear and to destigmatize things and to allow people as well to kind of, almost in this revivalist kind of way, bear witness to the fact that they took LSD and either, as Bill Hicks says, they laughed their ass off, mm-hmm. or they found something really valuable in that experience. And people like Steve Jobs and many other people coming forward and saying, I've engaged with this experience. It was really important for me. It was really powerful for me. There's more and more people doing that. So the more we can create a climate of normalizing it, that's one of the things that I hope will go some way to changing culture for the better.
Yes, excellent. And the book is Getting Higher, the Manual of Psychedelic Ceremony, Julian Vayne. It was a pleasure. It was an honor to have you on here. And people can go and find you and order the book. The book is on everywhere. Why don't you tell people where they can reach you and follow you and find the book and purchase it?
Okay, so to kind of get in touch with me, I maintain a blog which is called theblogofbaphomet.com, and so you can find various writings by me and various other people, lots and lots of different articles kind of at that particular site. In terms of the book itself, that's published by Psychedelic Press UK. and you can find that in I think it's in the spiritual books section of Amazon, and it's also in the party planning section of Amazon, which is a lovely joke on the part of my publisher, bless them. So Psychedelic Press UK, they produce a really, really good journal as well, and they produce lots of other kind of really cool psychedelic books. So in terms of getting in touch there, and also I'm involved in a thing called the Psychedelic Museum Project, which is psychedelicmuseum.net. So this is kind of in the early stages. What we want to do is we want to create, or we have created, some pop-up exhibitions in London. We're going to do a big one at the Psychedelics Conference Breaking Convention, and we're going to hopefully do them elsewhere. I'd love to do some in the States.
Yeah.
So we have a kind of a system whereby people who have cool stuff from back in the day that they want to share, stories they want to share, they send us photographs of the objects and a bit of a write-up, and then when we do these pop-up exhibitions, we gather all this stuff together and give people the opportunity to, again, reflect on the history and normalize these experiences. People have been doing this stuff for like tens of thousands of years, guys,
right.
And the blip of our legislation is just like a little blip.
Yeah.
Soon it will be gone.
That's
so
amazing.
We need to kind
of
track the history on this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And just by all these things you're doing, and with the museum, I mean, that's incredible. You just have the various different kinds of artifacts and physical pieces of psychedelic history, or just kind of juxtaposed together, creating this wonderful, interesting, diverse space. That's fantastic. So that's great. I mean, I wish I could, if I was venturing over there, I would love to come and check all these things out. Unfortunately, I'm across the pond here and tied up and tied down in this environment we call New York City. This weird place called New York City that somehow kind of I got this love-hate thing with it. It's this massive kind of matrix that I'm in. But
we'll find a space. We'll find a space. We'll call out for people to get their stuff together, and we'll put on an exhibition in New York. It'd be fantastic.
That would be really cool. Yeah.
It could be done. It could be done. I mean, we've had lots of people kind of coming to us with all kinds of archives, and material from people who were there at sort of ground zero, Leary, and so on. All these kind of characters. We've got material that's being donated to us. We've had recently a guy who was Andy Romanoff, who was one of the hog farmers. So the first kind of hippie commune in the States, sent through some stuff for the museum. And that's what we want to do. We want to kind of do these kind of pop-up exhibitions. So if someone's listening and they've got a suitable space and is interested, please get in touch.
Yeah, I might know some people. We'll stay in touch. Let's talk about that, because that's very interesting.
Cool.
It's cool that we have this history to look back on, and we can show it in an exhibition kind of style way, and really give a sense of tradition and purpose and normalization to these things. So it's wonderful work that you're doing. It was a pleasure speaking with you. I really loved having you on the podcast. Guys, go follow Julian's work. Go to his website, get his book. I mean, this is just phenomenal stuff. And until next time, thanks for tuning in to Mycadelic.